All right, this nuzzling beast you see before you is actually the theme for this week. Cat. Behold. Oh. You probably saw her 2 weeks ago when I posted that video, just, beforehand. Oh, she's shedding so much. It's summer, so, she's thinning out her coat and everything, and of course she's just a gigantic furry mass. Her name is Freya. She's very pretty, and she basically runs the house. She's neurotic and a diva and all the good things that a cat are, Anyway, her name was originally Odin when I got her. She's around 9 or 10 years old. I've kind of lost track at this point. But we rescued her after my previous kitty had unfortunately passed, and she just has made my life a whole lot better since then, huh? You're such a good girl. So I'm gonna leave her on camera as long as she deigns to stay in my lap. And then after that, you guys will be stuck with my face. So just gonna put her in frame here. And let's get to the breakdown. I am keeping it in the Monday through Thursday format for right now, just so that we have everything located in one place. If you need to take a break or pause in between the day's recaps, that's okay. Just watch the full video before you jump into the discussion, please. I work very, very hard on these. All right, let's get into it. Once I start, sharing the screen. Monday, number 1. My parents pay my sister and I for chores that we do ourselves. Okay, so maybe on the whole doesn't sound like there's a whole lot to fix. And there's not, there's just a couple things. So we're lowercasing sister here, because we don't have a name for the sister. Sister on its own is just a standard noun, so lowercase. You say sister and me, I'll get into that in a moment. And you need to say ourselves, okay? When you need to make this kind of third person pronoun plural, it's a lot of words, okay? When you're referring to multiple people in this third person perspective, F, the spelling here, FS turns to VES. So you have to conjugate that slightly in the spelling and change that up. We have different rules about pluralized spellings. This is just one of them. So let's get into this example here. And me versus saying and I. Normally you hear the and I, but in this case and in the middle of the sentence, we're definitely talking about both subjects performing the same action, okay, or being attached to the same action. The way that you test it to see which one works or doesn't work, okay? If you were to break up this part of the clause and just say, my parents pay my sister, that one works just fine. My parents pay I, that makes no darn sense. So could you say my parents pay me? Yes. So if it works in that case, when you break the sentence apart, then me is the correct choice, okay? So just a quick way to test it. Number 2, they are all, we want y'all to appreciate what it takes to earn a living. Honey, you are not making my job easy here, dude. Okay. So there's some things going on, some choices. I didn't mark this in red, but know that we're not doing the contraction of these two words, okay? You fix the whole thing by saying, they said, we want you to appreciate what it takes to earn a living, okay? This is informal, this phrasing, because it kind of sounds like you are talking about the quote to somebody as opposed to writing about it, right? And in this case, because we're writing, we need to adhere ourselves to the rules. When we use quotes, we usually use said before we get into the quote, okay? And you do, of course, keep the comma. Y'all versus you, we've talked about this as well. You is being used in a general sense here to refer to a couple of people, in this case, the sister and the me of the previous sentence, okay? So that can refer to more than one person. But also y'all, like that's another hint there. This is a colloquialism. It's not the most standard form of the word they want you to use. So make sure you make that change. And finally, we don't need a comma here in this position because we don't have any clauses to separate. This all goes together. So do not put a comma there. Number 3, circle the function of the underlined part of the sentence. Next year, we will learn how to balance a checkbook. So I, again, like to use process of elimination and kind of talk it out. This is not an adverb phrase because we're not describing an action in this underlined portion. Hopefully we can agree on that. It's not a noun phrase because we are not necessarily addressing the subject of the sentence. The subject is we will learn, okay? So you have that kind of going on. That would be a noun phrase. This is not. It's not an adjective phrase because we are not describing something, okay, or someone. Therefore, we're only left with prepositional phrase, which we've had experience with. It's telling us a sense of time or place at the start of a sentence with a comma, okay? So D. And number 4, a roadmap is to taking a trip as a budget is to what? I don't know that I love their arrangement of the ideas in this analogy, but see if you kind of follow my train of thought here. It's either finding a sale, earning a salary, or planning expenses. So the correct answer is going to be planning expenses. Now, back in the day before GPS was a thing on your phone, or Google Maps, whatever you call it these days, we had road maps where we had to use that to plan a trip if we were going to take a trip, okay? So essentially when you have a budget, it's kind of similar as a roadmap in that you are, for both of these things, making a kind of plan in place in order to execute an action, okay? So both sides of the relationship make sense, but again, I don't know that I agree with kind of the ordering that they did here. But essentially, you're still just making a plan. Tuesday, number 1, us students had a wonderful, exciting surprise in our English class today. Revised to say, we students had a wonderful, comma, exciting surprise in our English class today. So it might sound weird, but if you say we students, that is a correct fix here. You wouldn't say us, because that's very indirect with the usage of the pronoun they want you to do. We're trying to refer to the subject of the verb, okay? And so this is the subject form of that pronoun. You could also say we had a wonderful, exciting surprise and get rid of students. That would be okay. You need to put a comma between wonderful and exciting because they are both adjectives, and you must separate adjectives when they are two different descriptive words. Holy crap, Kat, get a grip. And then last for this sentence, class is lowercase. English is the proper noun out of this equation. Just because class is connected, it doesn't mean that you would capitalize class, okay? Number 2, Lois Lowry, who wrote the book The Giver, spoke to our class. This is an excellent book, by the way. It's one of my favorites. Revised to say, Lois Lowry, who wrote the book The Giver, spoke to our class. Now, whom is not a common word used in everyday speech, and the rules around it are a little bit strange, but I will do my best to explain it, okay? When whom comes into play is when you're referring to the object of a sentence, or in this case, a verb or a preposition. That might not make a lot of sense because that's a very grammarian type definition, but the way you test what works, if you can replace the given word with he or she, then you use who. If you can replace it and it still makes sense with him or her, then you use whom, okay? We're going to use who because we're referring just directly back to the subject of our sentence, but also if we said she wrote the book, that makes sense. You could not say her wrote the book. So just a way to test it. And of course, when we have our book titles, we don't quote it because that's the more specific, like if you were to have a chapter name, you'd quote that or a quote from a book. With a larger text, we always underline the whole thing. On to 3. She grew up in Hawaii, New York, Pennsylvania, and Tokyo, Japan. We need punctuation, okay? Now this might blow your minds a little bit, but we're actually going to use the semicolon, okay? Because you have 3 different locales in the United States here, but then you're confronted with an international place, okay? A city and a country. The list becomes complex by that very nature. So we're just trying to separate out logically because the relationship here, if it were just these 3 places, you could do comma, comma, and comma. But because the location relationship changes here, the commas would then not make logical sense later on in the sentence. So that's when a semicolon comes into play here, is if you have different relationships within the list. So semicolon and comma. All right, and number 4 for Tuesday, a theme in her books is that people need to care about each other. Again, process of elimination. This is not an adverb phrase because we're not necessarily describing the action or working to describe the action taking place. We are not, on the whole, describing a person or a thing. And we don't have a subject we are talking about here, okay? The subject of the sentence is a theme. So we're left with verb phrase. The way you know this is a verb phrase is you have both need and care. The other reason, to care, suggests with that position of the word to that you have a verb relationship going on here, okay? So this would be a verb phrase. Wednesday, 1 through 3, so we have the word bank. Chicken, again, these are all figurative parts of speech. You are not literally calling someone a chicken. It's just another way to describe them. Chicken is someone who is afraid. A night owl is someone who likes to stay up late. A sitting duck is someone who is at risk of danger and has no protection. So for number 1, without the proposed traffic light, pedestrians will be sitting ducks at the intersection. So you don't want people walking out into the road. That's not safe, that's dangerous. Therefore, sitting ducks is the appropriate choice. I like to hike, but I'm a big chicken when it comes to climbing up high places. People have fears or phobias of heights. I don't know if any of you do. So this is our textual evidence that chicken's the best option out of the 2 remaining. And finally, Ben has been a night owl all his life, so he can easily stay up to watch the meteor shower. Stay up as a phrase makes sense with this idea, with this idea, and it's the last option. Here is the paragraph I came up with. My friends and I were playing Minecraft until 2 a.m. You could say we're night owls. Becky, however, hadn't played before and was a chicken when it came to creepers. She was kind of a sitting duck without her sword, so we had to go rescue her. So, not based on a true story, but the positionality of each word here is used correctly as per our definitions up here. Sorry, I gotta make it a little smaller. And there's the creeper. Thursday, last one of the week, number 1. Yesterday, Ken and I present its report about the history of Australia. You heard me stumble a couple times because there are stumbly bits of the sentence. Yesterday, Ken and I presented our report about the history of Australia, okay? So we need to modify the verb of present to be past tense. We know that because of the use of the word yesterday in the prepositional position. You don't use its because you're talking about 2 subjects, and its isn't always used to refer to people in that sense. So our is the most appropriate 3rd person pronoun here, or 3rd person plural pronoun. And last but not least, Australia is a country, so you do need to capitalize it. Number 2, their original inhabitants come from Southeast Asia at least 50,000 years ago. Revised to say, its original inhabitants came from Southeast Asia at least 50,000 years ago. Now, whereas the case with the last sentence, its wouldn't have made sense, because we're talking about the history of the country, that's not referring to the people of Australia. So there as a group possessive pronoun isn't the best choice. We do have past tense. We know that from 50,000 years ago. Come needs to change to came to reflect that, so modify this verb. And southeast as a direction on its own may not qualify as a proper noun, but because it's specifying an area within Asia, that makes it a proper noun by association. Number 3, replace this word with a more objective word. Then James Cook explored its coast and stole the land for England. So, stole is negative, whereas claimed is arguably more middle ground. Now, you may disagree with that, but let me give you an example, okay? I believe claimed is more middle, because if you were to have this example, like they have there, stole is suggesting a negative action took place. If you said won, positive action probably took place, whereas claimed probably falls right in the middle there. If you had another word, I'd be curious to know. But that is number 3. And finally, number 4. We're going to rewrite this compound sentence, and there's not one correct way to do this, but just think about the sentence types that we have or have encountered, and then explain why you chose that type. So this is what I did. I displayed graphics while Ken talked about James Cook. Now, there's nothing wrong with the compound sentence, but if you can relay the most important details of a sentence in fewer words, then you are being what we would call more concise. You're getting more to the point without changing meaning in the sentence. So there were certain parts of this that didn't need to be said, so you can simplify it. And that is going to be it for this week. Holy moly, Freya stayed on my lap this entire time. That's a miracle. So I will see you guys in the discussion, and I will talk to you again next week. So have yourselves lovely discussion and a lovely weekend. Say goodbye, Freya. Goodbye, Freya. Oh, well, yeah, she says goodbye.